There are legends in sports, there are icons in history, but then there's Muhammad Ali, a man whose name echoed far beyond the boxing ring. A champion who floated like a butterfly, stung like a bee, and stood like a mountain when it came to his beliefs. We remember him for his lightning-fast jabs, his charismatic voice, and his unmatched confidence. But behind the gold medals and world titles, there was something far deeper, something spiritual. And that's the story many people don't know. This is the story of why Muhammad Ali chose Islam. Not as a phase, not as a trend, but as a path, a purpose, and ultimately a way to make peace with himself and the world. Ali wasn't just fighting opponents in the ring. He was battling an identity crisis, racism, societal expectations, and inner questions that fame couldn't answer. Born as Cassius Clay in the segregated South, he grew up witnessing injustice, feeling the weight of being black in a divided America. The world praised his fists, but few cared about his soul. And Ali knew there had to be more to life than being the greatest in sports. There had to be something greater than titles, trophies, or applause. That's where his journey toward Islam began. It didn't happen overnight. But every challenge, every victory, and every injustice he witnessed pushed him closer to asking the bigger questions. Who am I? What's my purpose? Why does the world praise me for boxing, but ignore the suffering of my people? Islam offered answers. It spoke of justice, unity, submission to one God, and the idea that your worth comes not from your fame, but from your faith, your character, your truth. When Ali declared, "I am Muhammad Ali and I am a Muslim," the world didn't clap. In fact, many turned against him. He lost fans. He lost fights. He was mocked, banned, and betrayed. But he didn't lose himself. And that's what made him truly great. He chose faith over fame, conviction over comfort, and truth over popularity. And in doing so, he didn't just win in the ring, he won in life. What drove this transformation? What did Islam give Muhammad Ali that millions of dollars and global fame could not? Why did he walk away from comfort to walk toward controversy, just to follow the truth he felt in his heart? This video takes you inside that moment of spiritual awakening. It reveals the side of Muhammad Ali that's often hidden. The seeker, the believer, the man who traded being the greatest for being truly guided. You'll hear how Islam shaped his choices, his humility, his worldview, and how it gave him the courage to fight not just for titles, but for truth. Because at the end of the day, Ali didn't just want to be remembered as a boxer. He wanted to be remembered as a man of God, a servant of peace, and a voice for justice. This is the story of a legend who found greatness, not in victory, but in submission to a higher power. This is Muhammad Ali's spiritual awakening. Muhammad Ali's journey toward Islam began not with a declaration, but with a growing unease inside him. At the height of his early fame as Cassius Clay, he had already achieved what most dream of: an Olympic gold medal, a dazzling boxing career, and the adoration of millions. But deep down, something didn't feel right. The applause was loud, but his questions were louder. Who was he really? Was he just an entertainer in gloves for a society that still looked down on his people? Was success only about winning titles and making money? These were not questions the ring could answer. They were questions of the soul. And as he began to explore them, he found himself drawn to a group that spoke to something he had never been taught in school: a sense of black pride, spiritual awakening, and accountability to God. Ali started attending meetings held by the Nation of Islam, where he heard voices like Malcolm X boldly speak about truth, dignity, and resistance to oppression. For a young black man in a divided America, These teachings were electrifying. They gave him a language for what he felt inside but couldn't explain. Islam, through this lens, wasn't just a religion, it was a call to reclaim his identity, a way to stand against racism, and a path to inner power. It didn't tell him to be humble before people, it told him to be humble before God. And for someone like Ali, who had grown tired of being praised by the crowd but judged by the system, that message struck a deep chord. But Ali didn't convert just to make a statement. He studied, he listened, he reflected. And over time, what started as a spark turned into conviction. Islam offered him a foundation, something solid to stand on when the rest of the world tried to pull him in different directions. It gave him discipline, clarity, and most of all, peace. This wasn't about abandoning who he was. It was about finally understanding it. When Ali finally accepted Islam and changed his name, he wasn't rejecting America. He was embracing truth. And that moment, that quiet spiritual decision, marked the real beginning of the greatest transformation of his life. When Muhammad Ali chose Islam, it wasn't just a private act of faith, it was a public revolution of the soul. At the peak of his boxing fame, he stood at a crossroads. Continue reaping the rewards of popularity and fame, or step into a path that would cost him endorsements, approval, and even his title. Ali chose the latter, proving that for him, faith wasn't just a belief, it was a mission. He rejected the expectations of the world around him, even when it meant being criticized, mocked, and misunderstood. He knew what it meant to be popular, but he was about to learn what it meant to be principled. When the world asked him to compromise, he stood firm. He didn't just become a Muslim in name. He lived it, breathed it, and carried its weight with pride. One of the most striking examples of Ali's devotion to his newfound faith came during the Vietnam War. When he was drafted into the U.S. military, he refused to fight, famously declaring that war was against his beliefs as a Muslim. This decision cost him everything: his heavyweight title, his boxing license, and nearly his freedom. But Ali didn't flinch. He didn't just say he was a Muslim, he proved it through sacrifice. That moment cemented his identity, not only as a boxer, but as a man of conviction. It was in that refusal that the world saw the depth of his faith. He wasn't afraid of losing money, fame, or reputation. He was afraid of losing his soul. Ali didn't just talk about Islam when it was convenient or when the cameras were rolling. He lived it in quiet, powerful ways. He gave to the poor, stood up for justice, and constantly reminded people that there's a world beyond the physical, one where your character matters more than your titles. Islam taught him that true greatness comes not from how many fights you win, but how many times you stand for the truth. And in Ali's case, standing for truth meant risking everything he had built. Yet he did it with a calm strength that stunned the world, because in his heart, he knew that no championship belt could ever replace the peace that faith had brought him. The influence of Malcolm X and the Nation of Glassland on Muhammad Ali's early spiritual path was both powerful and personal. At a time when the United States was burning with racial tension, Ali found in Malcolm X not just a friend, but a mirror to his own struggles. Malcolm spoke with fire and fearlessness, confronting a system that had long crushed the dignity of Black Americans. For the young Cassius Clay, who was already rising through the ranks of boxing fame, Malcolm X offered more than political insight. He offered a brotherhood rooted in purpose. Through Malcolm, Ali was introduced to the teachings of the Nation of Islam, which emphasized pride, discipline, self-respect, and a deep commitment to God. This wasn't the religion of quiet worship and passive hope. It was bold, it was defiant, it was transformational. For Ali, The appeal wasn't just theological, it was emotional and deeply human. He had seen the double standards of the world around him. He knew what it was like to win a gold medal for America and still be refused service at a diner back home. Islam, as introduced by the Nation of Islam, gave him a sense of ownership over his identity. It told him he was not inferior, not forgotten, not a product of a racist society. He was part of a divine design. That realization flipped a switch in him. Suddenly, boxing wasn't the only fight that mattered. There was a bigger one. The fight for truth, for spiritual liberation, and for justice. Malcolm X and Ali shared more than public platforms. They shared private moments of reflection, honesty, and transformation. Their bond was deep, though eventually strained due to ideological shifts within the nation. Even after their relationship cooled, the impact Malcolm left on Ali's life remained. He planted a seed that would grow far beyond their friendship, and though Ali would later align himself with mainstream Sunni Islam, the early guidance and brotherhood Malcolm provided were crucial in helping him take those first steps toward God. Ali never forgot that. In the years that followed, he spoke often of Malcolm with deep respect and gratitude. Because for Ali, it wasn't just about choosing a religion. It was about finding the courage to walk toward it. And Malcolm X helped light that path. As Muhammad Ali's understanding of Islam matured, his spiritual journey deepened beyond public declarations and symbolic gestures. Over time, he moved away from the teachings of the Nation of Islam and embraced mainstream Sunni Islam, which offered him a broader, more universally grounded spiritual foundation. This transition wasn't just theological, it was deeply personal. Ali wasn't looking for headlines anymore. He was searching for inner peace. In his earlier years, Islam had empowered him to stand against oppression and racism. But now, it was about quiet reflection, humility before God, and a genuine desire to serve. He began studying more, praying regularly, and understanding that Islam was not just about resistance. It was about submission, not to the world, but to the Creator. Ali's character began to shift as well. The loud, flamboyant boxer who once predicted knockouts in the ring started to speak more about kindness, patience, and compassion. His interviews were filled with references to God, heaven, accountability, and the purpose of life. He would often remind listeners that this world is temporary, that the real fight is not with opponents in a ring, but with the ego, with temptation, with injustice. The man who once shouted, "I am the greatest," now frequently said, "God is the greatest." That change didn't come from defeat, it came from spiritual awakening. Even in his declining health, as Parkinson's disease began to take its toll, Ali remained steadfast in his faith. He saw his suffering as a test, and he often said that he welcomed it if it meant being closer to God. He never stopped using his platform to represent Islam with dignity. Whether meeting presidents, visiting refugee camps, or speaking with children, Ali was consistently a messenger of peace and humility. He showed the world that Islam is not about anger or violence, it's about discipline, prayer, giving, and peace. His journey to Sunni Islam wasn't about abandoning his past. It was about evolving, about finding the full picture of what faith means when lived sincerely. Ali's spiritual growth reminds us all that Islam isn't just about a moment of declaration, it's about a lifetime of transformation. Through his actions, Ali demonstrated that true greatness lies not in power, but in submission to a higher truth that shapes the heart, humbles the soul, and elevates the human being beyond the material world. One of the most profound ways Muhammad Ali demonstrated his deep connection to Islam was through his consistent acts of service and compassion. As he matured in his faith, Ali began to see his purpose as something far greater than winning boxing titles or basking in the limelight. He believed that God had given him fame and influence for a reason, to make a difference in the lives of others. Whether it was visiting orphanages, comforting the sick, or showing up in war-torn regions to bring attention to humanitarian crises, Ali carried his faith into every corner of his life. He didn't just talk about Islam, he lived it through action. For him, Islam meant service, charity, and love for fellow human beings regardless of race, religion, or background. Ali traveled extensively after retirement, using his global reputation to advocate for peace and justice. He visited Palestinian refugee camps, raised millions for Parkinson's research, and promoted interfaith understanding. He would often say that helping others is what truly brings one closer to God. This wasn't a public relations campaign, it was the sincere expression of a heart shaped by faith. Even when his voice weakened and his movements slowed, his commitment never did. He would patiently sign autographs for fans, smile gently at children, and remind everyone that kindness is a form of worship. His charity extended beyond borders. In Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and America, he supported numerous initiatives focused on education, healthcare, and poverty relief. He didn't care about credit or recognition. He cared about pleasing his Creator. He believed that good deeds were the true legacy one leaves behind, not titles or trophies. Ali would often say that his real fight was not in the ring, but in using his life to serve something bigger than himself. The humility he showed later in life was perhaps his most striking transformation. Once known for boasting and bravado, Ali became an icon of quiet strength and spiritual depth. He showed the world that a true Muslim is one who uplifts others, who stands for truth with mercy, and who believes that every small act of goodness echoes in eternity. Ali's legacy is not just that of a champion fighter. It is that of a champion soul who used his platform to reflect the very essence of Islam: peace, compassion, and service to humanity. One of the most inspiring aspects of Muhammad Ali's life was how he used his global platform to challenge stereotypes about Islam and redefine what it meant to be a Muslim in the public eye. At a time when Islam was largely misunderstood in the West, Ali stood boldly as a proud Muslim, not just in name, but in action and character. He didn't shy away from his faith, even when it cost him popularity or brought criticism. Instead, he leaned into it, using every opportunity, press conferences, interviews, speeches, and public appearances, to present Islam not as something foreign or extreme, but as a faith rooted in peace, dignity, and moral strength. Ali's presence helped humanize Muslims to millions of people around the world who had never met one. Through his humility, generosity, and unwavering conviction, he showed what Islam truly looks like when lived with integrity. Ali often emphasized that being Muslim was about more than prayer. It was about how you treated people. He lived that philosophy. When the media questioned his faith, he responded with grace. When others mocked or misunderstood him, he forgave. He reminded the world again and again that Islam is a religion of peace, that Muslims are not to be feared but understood. In fact, his quiet strength and patient demeanor in the face of hostility often won over even his harshest critics. That's the power of living by example. Ali didn't try to convert people with arguments. He let his character speak for itself. Perhaps what made his impact so lasting was the way he never let fame corrupt his values. Despite being one of the most recognized faces on the planet, Ali stayed grounded in his beliefs. He never compromised his identity to fit into a system that often rejected it. And in doing so, he gave countless young Muslims around the world the courage to be proud of who they are. He showed that you can be faithful and fearless at the same time, that you can succeed without selling your soul, and that true greatness lies in submission, not to the crowd, but to the Creator. Ali didn't just represent Islam, he elevated its image on the world stage with dignity, pride, and unwavering love for God. Muhammad Ali's life was a journey that reached far beyond the boxing ring. He was more than a champion of sports. He was a champion of the soul, a man whose courage was not only in his fists, but in his faith. What made Ali unforgettable was not just his speed or his power, but his ability to stand firm for what he believed, even when the whole world pushed against him. He showed us that greatness isn't about gold medals or championship belts. It's about standing for truth, living with purpose, and serving something greater than yourself. His decision to embrace Islam wasn't a passing moment, it was a turning point that shaped the rest of his life. He didn't just wear the title of a Muslim. He carried the weight of it with pride, dignity, and devotion. Through the highs and lows, through fame and silence, through applause and criticism, Ali never let go of the faith that gave him peace. Whether he was speaking to millions or quietly helping someone in need, his actions reflected a heart anchored in sincerity and a soul connected to the divine. His life taught us that Islam is not about isolation, it's about connection. It's about love, justice, compassion, and unshakable belief. And Ali reminded the world time and time again that to be Muslim is to be merciful, humble, and brave. Even today, years after his passing, his legacy lives on, not only in sports history, but in the hearts of those who saw the light of Islam through his example. He gave the world something more than victories. He gave it understanding. He made people look at Muslims differently. He turned suspicion into curiosity, hate into respect, and ignorance into admiration. That is the power of living your truth. That is the power of faith. To everyone watching, thank you for taking the time to remember a man who was more than just a boxer. He was a servant of God, a voice for the voiceless, and a beacon of hope for generations to come. May his story inspire us all to live with courage, to walk with conviction, and to never be afraid of standing up for what's right. And may we always carry forward his message, not just in words, but in the way we live. He'll be coming. Peace be upon you, and thank you for being here.